the founder in 1984 of Celtic Frost and in 2008 of Tryptikon. Also the author of Only Death is Real, an illustrated history of Hellhammer and Celtic Frost, and in general, a fascinating Renaissance man of many talents and especially many interests, which we'll get into over the next several hours. We have to do everything long form in the world of Tom Gabriel Warrior. I'm Ian Christie. I wrote a book called Sound of the Beast, The Complete Headbanging History of Heavy Metal, and I'm also the publisher, very fortunate publisher, of Tom's book, Only Death is Real. And I would like to, I guess we'll set the tone with a song that was recently released on 7-inch by a band called Hellhammer from about 10 miles away from here in the outskirts of Zürich, Switzerland. This is a song called Blood Insanity. Blood Insanity by Hellhammer. I applaud you for your intestinal fortitude. The audience, the heavy metal audiences of 1982, 83 were not entirely prepared for this uprising, this explosion from Zurich, from the environs of Zurich, Switzerland. But this is the story, this is where the story begins for Tom Gabriel Warrior, the, I'm going to say, essential living, okay, fine, you're going to say it. You're going to have to say it yourself. But somewhere along the line, black metal, death metal, extreme forms of metal go back to this bunker under a kindergarten a few miles away from where we sit today. Tom, over the years, you and I have had the chance to meet several times and had very many long, engaging conversations, something that I've never managed to work into a book or anything, or it doesn't appear in your Only Death is Real book. A very profound thing that you said to me once about the decisions that have guided your life through Hellhammer, Celtic Frost, and now Tryptikon, that this path that you're on, you didn't choose it. It didn't exist, but you didn't choose this path. It kind of chose you. You didn't set out to be making the harshest, most grotesque possible sounds. It was the option that you saw. That was the door that was open.
Well, excuse my voice. I have a cold, and I was singing with it. Given the realities of my life at the time, of course, there was no other option for me. Sorry. I was simply drawn to the darkest possible music because it reflected my daily existence. It wasn't an intentional choice, of course. My choice would have been a happy world and me fitting in with everybody in school. But it wasn't really my choice. My surroundings decided for me. And so this was basically all that was left for me. It was a place that nobody else wanted to go. And that was all that was left for me. All the other places I wasn't allowed into. And in over the years, I made it my own.
In it, certainly. The world today, and the world today of all extreme metal and black metal, death metal, even the mainstream is profoundly affected by those early moments. There are maybe even a couple people here in the room, because we are in your home city, who saw Hellhammer perform. But to me, it's a very special little cloud or zone that you created for yourself. Very few friends, headbangers, very few friends gather together to form many friends. the stragglers from each village traveling by train, bicycle, moped, however it happened. Can you describe what was the Hellhammer reality?
Hellhammer was just a personal sanctuary. It wasn't designed to be a well-known band or a band with a lot of fans. It was just our little haven. We all had difficulties of our own personal sort in our lives, and by coincidence we found together. We formed this band because we were passionate about that kind of music, but it was a very personal thing. Hellhammer wasn't. We were of the opinion that nobody would ever listen to Hellhammer. Everybody laughed about us anyway. There was no extreme metal scene. And so Hellhammer was just our personal little project, our personal little world, to keep the other world that hated us and we hated it, to keep that away. And the more radical we became, the more we achieved that effect. Nobody wanted to touch us. Nobody wanted to listen to us. Nobody wanted to do a concert with us. And in a way, that was painful, but in a way, we also enjoyed it. We wanted to be our own circle. We did not feel we understood the rest of the world, and the rest of the world probably didn't understand us. So it was like a sanctuary of a handful of friends who felt the same for one reason or another.
And you really had, although maybe you didn't feel like you had a place in the broader world, you had all of the elements that Iron Maiden had in 1982. They were just scaled down to a friend with a little piece of plywood with a lighting rig on it.
And also, we could not play. This is a minor detail.
You look great.
A minor detail that might be of importance.
But you had stage gear and you had backdrop and...
Well, we had everything else, yeah. No, seriously, I mean, it was... part of the people involved in Hellhammer came from the punk scene, and that's no coincidence. And I myself was at the very beginning. We really couldn't play. But it wasn't really, we didn't look for that either. It was about extremity. We all of us had been looking for ever heavier music. And the pinnacle of that was Motorhead Venom Discharge. And we wanted to be part of that. And in that kind of music, you didn't really have to play excellently. It was something different that mattered. It was a passion. It was something that was burning inside of you, and burning beyond description. And that's what we had. We couldn't play, but we had that passion, and it was very honest. And it was honest because it wasn't geared to success. It was just a very personal expression. That's why it was totally honest.
For instance, when it came time to produce something that people could listen to at home around the world, you were aware of this demo trading scene, which is probably not something we have the time to fully detail right here, but a worldwide network of people experiencing bands like Venom and the new wave of British heavy metal bands, and then Metallica and the American bands. Your very first outing was not 3 songs, right? I mean, you went full bore.
Well, the thing is, because nobody took us serious, and we were, of course, diehard music lovers, and we were dreaming of having an album, even though that was far beyond our reach technically. But we wanted to have an album like everybody else. But we had no illusions. We knew nobody was ever going to give us a record deal. So we said, let's do a demo and make our own album on a cassette. Because at that time it was, of course, impossible to, as a private citizen to have an album, unlike today. So we tricked some poor sound engineer into recording like 200 songs or something. And we wanted to have our album. We basically were convinced this was all we would ever do. This cassette that later became the Triumph of Death demo. We were convinced that was the pinnacle of Hellhammer. I mean, nobody showed any interest, quite on the contrary. So we were just happy to have this music at home to listen to reflecting the 1.5 years or so of work that we had put into it. There was no, we were not under the illusion that this was going to lead somewhere. And we were also very self-critical. We had no self-confidence at the time. We were beginners, we were very young, and we knew it was extremely imperfect, especially for the time when there were singers like Ronnie James Dio and whatever. We knew we could never reach something like that. We just wanted to have our music on a tape.
And at the same time, you were producing newsletters and constantly redesigning artwork, band logos, and I'm assuming consuming metal, consuming hard rock,
yeah.
Just
it was our passion.
Voraciously.
It was our life. We, as I said earlier, we didn't fit into anywhere. And so we created our own little world that we understood. And of course, we gave all our time to it. We took it very serious. But we knew, of course, it was an underground niche. You know, the myth that Hellhammer is nowadays has nothing to do with what it actually was. It was a sanctuary for us, and that was really it.
It's really remarkable compared to bands. I would say in hard rock and in punk rock, you have the Stooges, who were sort of floating around lost in Ann Arbor, Michigan. But, you know, somebody like the Ramones, they had management. They were in a media capital. Even the Ramones they were practically Liberace compared to what Hellhammer.
Well, where was I going to find a manager in Nurensdorf? I mean, and even in Zürich, I mean, we're talking about 1982 or something. There was barely a music scene to speak of in Switzerland. There was a handful of venues. There wasn't really a scene. And especially not for heavier music, for extreme music. There was a few punk bands that were quite fantastic. But that's really the end of the scene. And there was no, I mean, the managers we had here was for major commercial music. If I would have come with that little Hellhammer tape, I mean, I wouldn't have even gotten into the door. So that wasn't, I mean, we didn't even consider that. There was simply no chance. It wasn't like today where you can Google extreme metal management. You know.
Right, or go to YouTube and get singing tips. And
so we formed Prowling Death Management, which was the same people who were the band. There you go. By now, of course, Prowling Death Records is a real record company in London. But back then it was formed in my childhood bedroom, you know, and it's just proudly put on our flyers when it was really the same guys.
The spirit, the first hurdle that Hellhammer overcame, I mean, that you overcame in your long career, I think would have sent 99.99% of all people crying back to find another interest, to take up tennis or something. You sent the demo out, and the reviews came in. What was that? How were the reviews for the Hellhammer demos?
Well, the people who actually bothered to write back hated it. Yeah, that's the truth. Most of the people, I mean, first of all, we sat at home going through our record collection, writing down the addresses on the back of our favorite metal albums, and then we sent the demos there. Most of the people didn't waste a stamp on it to reply. And those who did said, no thanks, there's no way. There was only one record company in America, Metal Blade Records, who said, we see some kind of promise. If you do a better demo, maybe. And there was one Swiss record company at the time.
But that was enough, right? I mean, a tiny pinpoint of light.
It was better than nothing. But there was a Swiss record company actually here on this street, Langstrasse, called Disc Trade. And they wrote back that we should go practice. That we were miserable and we should go practice, and there was no chance. So the reactions weren't really encouraging.
But at least you had the heavy metal press to turn back on, right? They were encouraging. Metal Forces. Wait a minute. This was. But it was there was a lot of negativity thrown that way, but
The thing is, we realized relatively early on that the more radical the negative reactions were, the more interested people became. And that's probably an effect of the punk wave, because punk opened the doors to anybody. And for the normal consumer punk, the punks couldn't really play. So having journalists writing that we cannot play and that we're really extreme, but it's shit, a certain fraction of the people who read that became interested because it sounded like some of the punk bands. And even though that wasn't the intention, but it got us a lot of attention. We got letters from all over the world and who wanted to buy our demo and so on and so on. And that was really the beginning of at least something.
With broader exposure and congratulations on persevering through some hellaciously negative reviews at the time.
What else was I supposed to do? There was nothing else.
Go work for the train company or something.
It was too late by that time. I was going to become an aircraft mechanic, but by that time, no.
So once again, this wasn't a path. You didn't have a choice. You were already on the path, and that's what it was.
Yeah, by that time, yes.
It chose you.
By the time we did the second Hellhammer demo, I was giving up my apprenticeship. Yeah.
With your first trip as a band out of Switzerland to Berlin to record the Apocalyptic Raids EP, I think everything changed. It seems that that's when you realized that what the next level of possibility was. Can you talk about can you talk about the realization that Hellhammer was moribund and something new would have to be launched? Something new?
Well,
maybe in Celtic Frost?
Recording the Hellhammer EP was a wake-up call. Because we felt the limits of what we were able to do. And we realized we had to improve massively. The record company told us that, the press told us that, we knew it ourselves. Being in a studio with a real producer and being exposed to that environment was an utter wake-up call. There was no way around it, at least at the time.
And it was inspiring to be in a place where they had producers who knew somewhat what to do with you.
I would say intimidating. Well, it was inspiring, of course, but as I said, I mean, we knew the vehicle of Hellhammer had reached a limit. We wanted to do more than just that.
With Celtic Frost, I mean, almost immediately, you then became an international touring band. You were part of the thrash metal wave. You came through the same record labels as Slayer, Metallica, countless bands.
Well, you're skipping like.
I'm skipping a lot, but I don't want to force you to reread your Only Death Is Real book, basically.
You could have just brought it.
Oh, I do have it. Yeah, it does not fit in a pocket. But very quickly, you were on tour in the United States. You were meeting your contemporaries from Canada, Germany, the United Kingdom, and the United States. I'm curious what bands did Celtic Frost, after being isolated in your musical infancy in Zurich, who did you feel comradeship and kinship with when you came out into the world? Or was it still Celtic Frost as a isolated?
That's actually a very difficult question. It was probably bands we didn't meet, like like Sisters of Mercy and Bauhaus and things like that. I'm really sorry about my voice going away. I've been dealing with a heavy cold for like a few days, and I had to practice like this, and this is the result. I hope we can finish this thing, but we'll see. I sound like Lemmy.
Yeah, the whiskey, please.
That would probably help.
But that is, you're talking about bands that at the time I think wouldn't have given respect to heavy metal to even tour with a heavy metal band, Sisters of Mercy. And
We tried many times. We tried, but it was impossible at the time. Yeah.
I wanted to know about. This is a little bit of a tangent. It's a very important one. Heavy metal, 30 years later, is I would say very respected and almost fetishized, and all of a sudden has many, many doorways open that weren't open back in 1985. Has the world changed and everybody finally understands Hellhammer? Or is there something that people, not just Hellhammer specifically, but this extreme, forceful, heavy way of thinking? Has the world changed and all of a sudden everybody gets it? Or is there a misunderstanding about the fundamental elements that create good heavy metal?
The world has changed massively. What was extreme yesterday is no longer extreme. And that has helped. Hellhammer, of course.
Jumping into this era of Celtic Frost, touring internationally, releasing incredibly influential records, Morbid Tales, To Mega Therion, then giving full flight to for metal avant-garde tendencies, but really a wide musical palette on Into the Pandemonium. I'm curious, what were some key moments of validation once the negativity wasn't the sole engine of, the negativity and passion weren't the sole engines?
That's a good question. I think merely recording Morbid Tales was an enormous validation. Any of the first three albums, anyway.
The dissolution of Celtic Frost over a couple of years in the early 1990s led to a long period of led to your band Apollyon Sun.
You're skipping a lot of years.
I'm skipping a lot of years, but it's getting us to a few words from you about Tryptikon. So, during the 1990s, you attempted to take the heaviness from guitar music into electronic music with the band Tryptikon, where things are composed in a different way. The subsonic frequency potential is completely different because you're dealing with synthesizers and samplers that don't have the same physical limitations as acoustic instruments. And
you're talking about Apollyon Sun?
Apollyon Sun. And so, without even getting into the crucial years of the Celtic Frost reunion, when you formed your current band Tryptikon, you were now drawing from the experience of Hellhammer being a universally, worldwide, influential key band, as important to extreme metal as Black Sabbath is to heavy metal, and as
you gotta stop.
Oh, okay, but it's. I'm telling it like it is.
It's bullshit.
And your experiences with Celtic Frost, actually physically moving into successfully making that heavy music, and then the lesser known, but also
it was you who had the whiskey.
The vapors are getting to me, man.
Really,
you had a vast palette to draw from by the time you formed Tryptikon. about 10 years ago in like 2008.
Tryptikon was simply an escape from the realities of Celtic Frost. I wanted to do the music, but not the personality clashes. That's really all there is to it.
Is it an advantage having younger musicians?
I don't care, as long as they're on a reasonable personal level. I don't care. Age, gender, I don't care.
And how did making electronic music in the 1990s adjust the way that you wrote songs?
More than I could explain it right now. It was crucially important, absolutely.
You've almost eclipsed what Celtic Frost was never able to tour with Sisters of Mercy, but now you're making music that kind of surpasses what Sisters of Mercy were. They were a rock band with dark atmospheric elements. Tryptikon is a very, very heavy metal band exploring the same territory in a much more extreme way.
We never made the distinction. For us, music was music. I didn't give a shit if it was punk, new wave, metal, classical, jazz. I didn't want to be confined. For me, Sisters of Mercy is the same thing as Deep Purple.
And this has been clear that you've referenced these influences. I know that you listen to singer-songwriters, probably were affected by the loss of Leonard Cohen just today. And as much as completely unknown British heavy metal bands from 1979, like A to Z.
Yes.
In recent years, you've become more outspoken about your vegetarianism and about animal rights. It's something that I wanted to bring up today because I remember a few years ago...
Because I can't say anything about it.
I could basically say anything right now. You've become outspoken about your love of strip mining and poisoning the earth, right? Oil spills. But I think it's something important enough to you that you'll...
It's extremely important, and it should be important to everybody. There's no excuse for the way we're treating our planet and our fellow living beings on this planet. There's absolutely no excuse. And it's a concern of everybody, even if they ignore it.
And I recall there was a German webzine, Voices from the Dark Side or something. Maybe it was the first to really contact you and ask you about this. And that was the first time really that I knew about your consciousness in this area. And now you are very outspoken about this.
No, I'm not a missionary. I'm not a missionary. I don't tell people what to do. I live the life that I live. If somebody asks me, I'll answer, but I'm not a missionary. I hate this shit. I hate people telling me what to do. So I don't tell other people what to do. But I have a brain, and I would hope other people have one too.
Sometimes people share one brain. Large groups of people.
Yes, a lot of people.
And it's very worn out. You describe yourself as a musical purist. This can mean anything like a lack of interest in seeing Black Sabbath without Bill Ward, or...
How did you know?
Well, I know there are very, very way more precise ways that this manifests itself. What is a musical purist?
How am I supposed to know that? I live my life. I have my opinions. But I don't know what a musical purist is. I have no idea.
Maybe a fundamentalist.
Yeah, I know, but who am I to set the rules, you know? I don't know anything. I'm just a kid from a Swiss farm town who was very desperate and found a sanctuary in music. That's fantastic, but that's really all there is to it too at the same time. I've been very fortunate, and I've been fortunate for people like this. I couldn't have done anything without people to listen to my music. But that's really the end of it. Without these people, Tom Warrior would not exist. There was a time when nobody gave a shit about my music. And then these people came along and actually gave a shit. And that's why we're sitting here. But there's very little inside of me that has caused this. It's the grace of the people who gave my music a chance. And as we talked about earlier, I can remember very well the time when nobody gave my music a chance. I'm the last person to know why this changed. I feel extremely fortunate that it did change. But it's not something I did. I was just a kid who was beaten up every day in school, who was a complete outcast, who was not taken serious. And then when I made music, it continued like that. I was beaten up a different way. And then for some reason, the music became accepted. I don't know why. I'm still playing the same music. I actually think Tryptikon is far closer to Hellhammer than Celtic Frost was at certain periods. But why this is sometimes a miracle to me too. And my personal opinions about animal rights and everything, I'm not Britney Spears or anything like that. I sometimes feel embarrassed when people ask me about that. I'm not one of those fake politicians who tell you what to do. I'm not somebody who puts my head in the sand. I inform myself what's going on this planet, what's going on, how we treat animals, how we treat the environment, and I cannot consciously support that. But that's just me. Apparently, most other people can. I can't. But I'm not a missionary. I'm not in the church. I don't tell you what to think. And I also think as a musician, you should be careful with political statements, lifestyle statements. I'm just a fucking musician. Who am I to tell people what to do? I know it's normal in Hollywood, but not for me. If somebody asks me, I will explain myself. But I'm not the lifestyle guru. I can only hope that if I say something in an interview, that people will think about it. That they might not kill an animal to have it on their table. But that's really the extent of what I should say and what I can't say. At the end of the day, I was just the singer of Hellhammer. And what does that mean on this world? Nothing.
Thank you.
No, it's fine. Well, you're much nicer than my ex-wife.
Now tea has materialized. But your music, this goes into the visual side of what you've always done has been there have been occult trappings and a lot of fascination with darkness. And I think that in the world of extreme music, there's not, the animal rights question that I asked was interesting because it's an actual real world clue to your morality.
Look, Ian,
I
feel extremely passionate about that. Extremely passionate. I could fucking torture to death any human being who harms an animal. But that's just me. I know it's for millennia, it's been normal for people to kill animals. So who's Tom Warrior from Nurensdorf to tell people to change? I just think we came pretty late in the history of the earth. These beings have been around here for much longer than us, and we come here and we enslave everything just for our egotistical needs. We destroy the environment, we destroy our fellow beings just so we are happy. I've been a meat eater too when I was younger. But one day something set something in motion, and when you think about it, it's not sustainable. Not for my conscience. I want to be able to look into the mirror at the end of the day. I enjoyed meat. I enjoyed the taste of meat. But I don't enjoy pain and suffering and torture. And we don't even kill these animals with compassion. We kill them brutally in a stressful environment, as many animals as possible per day for profit and whatever. I cannot be a part of this. But this is me. I have no right to tell these people what to do, nor do I want to tell them what to do. All I can think is maybe they'll think of this eventually too, like I did. And as I said earlier, as a musician, what right do I have to tell people what to make, what kind of lifestyle choices? If I have any competence, it's extreme music. I hate politicians telling me, interfering with my life. So who's Tom Warrior to tell people what to do,
Another area you've shown competence in is the visual aspects of music packaging.
That's a nice way to skirt the issue.
No, I think you sealed that issue with a strong period. That I have nothing to add. Your vision for Hellhammer, Celtic Frost, and now Tryptikon has always included a strong visual component. You mentioned previously the lack of music industry infrastructure in Switzerland, but you did benefit from having a countryman, Hans-Rudi Giger, who also had followed his own individualistic path to create his own completely vast and incredible visual art universe, and creating many universes. And you've had the great fortune of having your paths intertwined since the Celtic Frost To Mega Therion album. You worked with the man for many years up until his untimely passing.
Well, Giger was one of the few people to actually take us serious. To our utter astonishment, he actually noticed Hellhammer, he listened to Hellhammer, and he told me at least that he could see some parallels in his astonishing work to Hellhammer's minute little work. I think maybe this was because Giger for a very long time was also shunned and laughed at, and was pushed into the underground in Switzerland. And in fact, he was pushed into the underground until the very end. I mean, the leading art museum in this city will not show Giger to this very day. For them, he's just some kind of idiot who paints penises in black, when for the rest of the world, he's a genius artist. So I think Giger could relate most of all because he was also an outcast. Because at the time when we contacted him, we didn't even have a record deal. We were nobodies. And he was really the only person in Switzerland at the time, the only person that mattered who took us serious. And I can only attribute that because he was also, to the fact that he was also an underground artist and not taken serious. And we talked about that many years later, and he confirmed that.
When was your first meeting with him? In the flesh. Initially, he was corresponding through the post.
The initial meetings all took place by phone and by letters. There was quite a number of letters sent back and forth. I have all those letters still. The meeting only took place in the 2000s. The first, well, we actually once met him before, but we didn't make ourselves known. We felt such respect for him, we didn't want to disturb him. So the actual real first meeting only took place in the 2000s. Before that, it was just on the phone and by letters and everything. It was extensive, but not in the flesh. We were so grateful. We didn't want to bother him, believe it or not.
We talked about the Hellhammer bunker and the small world that you, as a band, created with sound and music and kinship. You became part of the inner world of Giger and his wife at their home with all kinds of things going on. And what kind of a role did you play? And do you continue to play, actually?
Yeah, I'm still part of the Giger estate, what it's called now, the Giger workshop, which of course still exists. His art still exists, his museum still exists, his exhibition still exists. And I'm very fortunate to still be a part of that, which to me is an honor beyond description. There again is something that as a teenager, looking at Giger's books and Giger's posters, I never thought would happen, just like with Hellhammer. It's a huge honor, and I try whatever I can to contribute to Giger's work. I was fortunate enough to be invited to be the curator of the Giger photo exhibition that's taking place right now at his museum. I really don't know why this honor was bestowed upon me. You know, I told Giger many times over the years how much he meant to me, and he didn't want to hear it. He was a very modest person, and every time I tried to tell him what he meant to me and to Celtic Frost, he ran out of the room. He didn't want to hear it. It was uncomfortable for him. And there again, on my side, it's I don't know why I'm there, and I don't know why they chose me, but I feel very honored, of course, and I do whatever I can to enhance Giger's legacy in my tiny, tiny way, because he's a genius and I'm just Tom Warrior.
Can you shed a little light on what the Giger reality was like? If you went to see him maybe for an hour, wouldn't it? You kind of lose track of space and time, isn't it?
One of Giger's ex-girlfriends is in this room, and I probably should not shed any light on Giger's daily existence. Giger was a very unique person, and if I would disclose anything of his private, and I'm not trying to make it artificially exciting, but if I would shed any light of his existence, I would intrude into his privacy. I know a lot of people intrude into Giger's privacy. I don't want to be a part of that. Giger was a very unique person. He lived a very unique life. You had to be somehow very tolerant to understand this and to accept this. And I cannot betray his trust by disclosing this. He was, in his own way, very open in private, and this is not the place to disclose it. You know, just because he's dead.
Well, this is the place for you to be open in public. So I'll turn the spotlight back on you.
Well, my pathetic life, compared to Giger, who's basically the Hieronymus Bosch of the 20th and 21st century. That's quite a difference. My life is irrelevant. Giger, on the other hand, will be known still in 1,000 years because he was a genius. And I'm not saying that because I worked with him or because I was a friend. I was fortunate enough, for example, to witness Giger one day in his kitchen sketching something on a napkin. And just by the way he carried his pen, the way he drew, you could notice immediately he has a talent that I've never seen in anybody else. It was just totally evident, without any worshipping, that he's a genius. He carried the pen in such a way it's beyond description. And then you realize this is not the ordinary thing. And compared to that, I'm seriously a nobody.
Thank you. Your visual dexterity is very unique. It's very unusual that a band member, a band leader, can set forth the visual style as you've done over many records. During this century, though, you've actually, and I've always assumed, but I've never asked, maybe under the inspiration and encouragement of Giger, have begun to make sculpture, and even I noticed you're wearing jewelry of your own design. This is the Tryptikon logo. How does did you even tell him about that?
About what?
About Tom Warrior death masks and.
I gave him one, and of course I was under no illusion that my art would amount to anything. But I gave him one just as a gift for his birthday one day, many years ago. I gave him one of my death masks, one I really liked. And I thought, his house is filled with gifts by name people, musicians and artists. There's fantastic gifts there. And I thought my stuff is just going to be the bottom of the pile. But to my astonishment, he told me to hang it up. And he told me where, and it's quite a prominent place. Nobody was more astonished than me about that. My little ridiculous death masks are just a hobby of mine. And Giger's an artist. So I don't know if he did it because he felt sorry for me. No, seriously, I mean, I'm not trying to artificially, it's really, but he hung up, so he knew that I was doing it. He professed that he liked it, but maybe he was just like, I don't know. I do these death masks because I was always fascinated, ever since I was a child, of death masks. And there was a point in my life where I was wondering what my death mask will look like one day, and I realized when I'm dead, I'm not going to see it. So at the end of the 2007 Celtic Frost US tour, Les Barney, Giger's agent in America, arranged for me to go to the Fangoria magazine's premises, and they have a workshop there. And a few friends of his took a live cast of me and enabled me with this live cast to do my own death masks. It was just a curiosity of mine for my own purpose. And to my astonishment, somebody wanted to buy a death mask, and then two people wanted to buy a death mask, and then it became an art project. But in reality, it was just some spleen of mine to use my face as a canvas, like I do on stage, and to see my death mask while I'm still alive to see it. That's really all there is to it. I'm very careful with the word art, both in my death masks or in music. Art is a huge word. And in today's society, art is massively overstretched. Everybody calls themselves an artist. To me, art takes talent. And I'm quite unsure if I actually have talent, seriously. So if other people call my work art, whether it's music or my death masks, it's flattering, but I cannot really take it serious. Art to me is Dali or Bosch or Giger, but not Tom Fischer.
Because your associations are so diverse, I'd like to ask you, you're also very careful with the word friends, colleague, peer, and inspiration. And I'd like to know, in the realm of peer, who are some people that, when you come into contact them, you feel completely free and like there's some, the fog has been lifted, and there's someone that has been through something, and you see eye to eye.
Well, there's you for one thing.
I was not fishing for that.
One person I feel is a peer, and which is also astonishing to me, is Kevin Hayburn from Angel Witch, who as a young teenager I worshipped. I had everything by Angel Witch. This band was a major influence to me. And many years later, I was fortunate enough to meet him, and we became friends. It's a friendship that still lasts to this day. And I know his life was far from easy too, and which is probably something that connects us. He's very different to me. He's a very unique person, kind of difficult to access. But in spite of that, I feel a strong connection to him. And should I live long enough, we probably do an album together. We talked about it. That's somebody I look at as a peer. For example.
Wow, and then and Bill Steer from Carcass has been playing in Angel Witch, so that's all of a sudden this project starts to take shape.
Bill never talks to me. I've met him a million times with Angel Witch. He's always in the background, not saying a word. I don't know what's his problem.
His problem is he's an incredibly shy person.
That's a shame. He looks fantastic. He's a fantastic guitar player.
Guitar player.
He used to be a fantastic member of Angel Witch. It's a shame.
He's wasting his time with this death metal stuff.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that.
When you look down the tendrils of time into into bands active today, and maybe in your estimation, like Dark Throne is a younger band, but they've been around 25 years now already, or 30 actually. What, where do you see, what lights up? What are some bands or some modes of operating as a heavy band that give you some, I'm not going to say faith in tomorrow. I'm not going to put that burden on you, but where you see some fire today.
You're really asking me very difficult questions.
I came a long way to ask you. I came a long way to ask you these questions.
I'm generally very disillusioned with today's scene, and maybe that's a factor of my age, and I'm sorry about that. But fortunately or unfortunately, I was born in 1963, and because of that, I was a witness to at least two periods that were extremely exciting in the kind of music we're talking about, heavy rock, heavy metal. One was the 1970s, and the other one was the early 1980s. And having lived through that time and having that time influence my life significantly, I find it extremely difficult to find something that's equally inspiring nowadays. Now, maybe that makes me sound old, but it's you're asking me for my personal opinion, and unfortunately, that's it. I wish it was different, honestly. But sometimes I listen to these modern bands, and they're all perfect beyond description. They're much more perfect than any bands. We all wanted to be so perfect in the early 80s, but we couldn't. Nowadays, even the youngest musicians are so perfect. But I sometimes wonder, is that really the goal of heavy music? Maybe it's the goal of jazz, but heavy music to me is always anarchy, revolution, energy. And I miss that in all that technical perfection, and the technical perfection is even enhanced by computer technology in the studio. And I wonder, is that really the purpose of heavy music? To me, it's not. To me, heavy music is passion, as a fire. And if you play a mistake, so fuck it. But unfortunately nowadays, the albums I hear, they're produced to death. And most of it is recorded directly into the computer. I like albums where you actually hear the air between the amp and the microphone, where you hear the drums screeching, the screws on the drums. But you don't hear that anymore. So there's a couple of modern bands that I like Wounded Kings or Scorpion Child. Or Orchid. But what are these bands doing? They're basically recreating music that existed in the 70s. It's not really modern metal per se. Maybe that reflects poorly on me, or it reflects poorly on the current metal scene. I don't know. I'm not the person to make that judgment. But that's the way I see it, and I miss it hugely. I miss hearing albums with fire, albums with some kind of dirt, with imperfections, but with perfection in passion. I miss that. There's a competition going on between guitar players, how many notes you can play in a minute, and how perfect you can play that, and how fast and how complicated your albums can be. Look at Obscura, for example, who are a phenomenal band, but what is the purpose? Is it the Olympics of heavy metal? Or are we talking about heavy metal? That's the question I pose to myself. Maybe just I'm an old fart, I know that. But I've spent an entire life in this scene, and I'm very passionate about it. And I wish some of the young people playing music nowadays would just fucking thrash a guitar from time to time. Throw over a stack of Marshalls like I did it. Because that's really the essence of that music. Not playing 10,000 notes perfectly. I have huge respect for that, but that's not all there is to it. If you want to do that, go to a university. But that's not, to me personally, there's no place for that on a heavy metal stage. That's why I went into heavy metal.
As you mentioned, being a little kid when Deep Purple played here in Zurich, and just seeing on television the news reports of mayhem and fires and bottles smashed everywhere, and the kids just running wild after they heard this stuff.
I said that many times tonight. My opinion is just my opinion. and my opinion is heavily shaped by my fucked up youth. I know other people had a much more perfect youth and probably have a much more balanced view of how things should be. I grew up very fanatically, very radically, and of course that translates into the way I approach music. So everything I say is, of course, to be taken with a grain of salt. I know people are not Tom Warrior, and that's fine. But that's why heavy metal attracted me, because there was some anarchy in it. If I wanted perfection, I could have gone to some a party, a political party, where everything's by the book, or I could have become a tax advisor or a banker, because everything there is by the book, and the more perfect you are, the better you are. I went to heavy metal because there's anarchy, and because there you can actually smash a fucking guitar. And I really miss that. I miss when heavy metal was like that. It's become as sterile as so many other things now in our times. And I think that's a shame. I mean, even punk nowadays is fucking designed. What's wrong with people?
There's the this is a you just opened a door for me to ask you about the unexpected Blood Insanity 7-inch, a new release by Hellhammer in 2016. How did that come about? What was your intention?
We were totally passionate in the early 80s about 7-inch singles by new wave British heavy metal bands. And of course our unfulfilled dream was to release a 7-inch just like that. And nobody wanted to give us a record deal. Nobody took us serious, and we didn't have the money. I mean, we couldn't even buy strings or guitar picks. So that single remained a dream. We drafted a little memo where it said where we stated all the details about such a single, but there was no way we could have realized such a single. Nowadays, I'm the owner of a record company in England, and I have a name in the industry. And I just need to call up some people and say, let's do a single, and they say yes. So at a certain point in time, I thought, why don't I do this single now? And I called up Bruce Day and Steve Warrior from Hellhammer and said, what do you think if you do this single now, just so it exists while we're still alive? And they were enthusiastic, so we said, okay, let's do it. So we did it on our own label, and it was distributed by Sony, which is incomprehensible for Hellhammer, but that's how it is nowadays. My work of 34 years in between has made this possible. It's just a little personal spleen. The single doesn't make us rich. There was a lot of people who said, oh, now he's making money from Hellhammer, which is, of course, bullshit. The single is limited to 3,000 issues. It was hugely expensive in its creation. The single yielded peanuts as far as money is concerned. The purpose of the single was to see it existing while we are still existing. It was just a little personal spleen for us to have a Hellhammer single while we're still alive, because that was our dream in 1983. That's really the entire story of that single.
Something in between girl school and Holocaust in the 7-inch filing bin.
I would rather file it between Aragorn and Venom. And Eric Keller will agree to that.
Well, you just gave a shout out to a distinguished professor, PhD, who came out of that Hellhammer bunker. I was going to ask you that earlier, and I am curious, what happened to this gang? Where's the Hellhammer gang? Where are the Bassersdorf's kids today? In all these years later, did they all die in motorcycle accidents or horrible drug-related deaths, or have they all gone on to unique...
I really don't know.
Where are Bruce Day and Steve Warrior, for example?
Bruce Day has a scuba diving school in Indonesia. Steve Warrior lives not far from here in Zürich. He's had a very difficult life after Hellhammer, and I really don't want to go too far with that because it's his private life. He's doing reasonably okay nowadays. We are in contact, but he can't play bass anymore. Bruce Day occasionally tours as a road manager for quite well-known bands, but he doesn't play an instrument anymore. As for the other bands who attended our rehearsals, I know some of them still, but some of them also got, at least for me, they got lost in the haze of time, unfortunately. But even so, without wanting to sound nostalgic, I carry these people in my thoughts all the time. There's never a moment when I work with Tryptikon, for example, when we're on stage in Wacken, which is probably the pinnacle of what you can achieve with the music that we are playing. These people are always part of me, and my roots are always part of me. I'm never detached from that. I always have the scene that I experienced in the Hellhammer bunker. I have that in my mind, always. I'm never tempted to be on some kind of star trip. I would have never been on that Wacken stage 3 times without these people. Some of those people were extremely instrumental. One of those people bought me my first Iceman guitar, which is a guitar type that I still play to this day. They gave their money, their time to make Hellhammer and later Celtic Frost huge. And there again, Tom Warrior wouldn't exist without these people and the people we're talking about right now. So even at the moment when I'm on stage in Wacken, I think of these people, and that's really the truth. I have no illusions about my own talent. I know very well that I would not be on such a platform without these people. Even if I don't know what they're doing nowadays, some of those.
I think the status of the Hellhammer bunker, where so many of these events went down, if I understood correctly, the building, it was underneath a kindergarten, first off, where death metal and black metal kind of had its...
It was a kindergarten underneath a kindergarten.
Under a kindergarten. The kindergarten...
Pretty...
a romper room under a...
That took you a while,
didn't it? The building was demolished a few years ago, and a new building was built. So... Of course, you think it's lost. There's no more bunker, but as it turns out, the bunker survived. They didn't destroy
I think the actual bunker actually survived. They replaced the building above it, but in doing so, they dismantled part of the bunker, and I saved some of the stones of the Hellhammer bunker. I have them actually framed at home. That's how important that place was to me. This was the bunker where we created the Hellhammer demos, the Apollyon Sun, the Apocalyptic Raids EP, where we formed Celtic Frost, where we wrote To Mega Therion, where we wrote Into the Pandemonium, and of course I went there with my mountain bike, and I filled my pockets with rubble from the part of the bunker that disassembled. I could not bear seeing it go. I had to preserve that because to me, my entire life took shape in that place.
So thank you very much for attending once in a lifetime opportunity to hear
me screech. Yeah.
To hear a man known for his deep, gravelly voice, actually using it to express the vast thoughts inside of that mind. Thank you.
I'm glad we
survived.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks.
Thanks.
And thank you, everyone. Thank you, Red Bull.